The city hummed a familiar lullaby outside Oliver's window, a soft, constant whisper that was as much a part of his home as the worn rug in his living room. Inside, the evening air was still and warm, carrying the faint scent of the herbal tea he'd just finished. Oliver was settled deep into his favorite armchair, a book resting open on his chest, its pages unread for the last 10 minutes. He wasn't really reading, he was just enjoying the quiet. The soft glow of his floor lamp cast long, friendly shadows across the walls, making his small apartment feel like a cozy cave, a safe haven from the busy world outside. He lived on the third floor of an old brick building, a place with creaky wooden floors and a slightly unreliable elevator that often meant taking the stairs. But Oliver liked it. He liked the feeling of history in the walls, the way the sunlight streamed through the tall windows in the mornings, and the comforting sense of being part of something bigger, even when he was completely alone. Being single in the city sometimes felt like being a tiny fish in a vast ocean. But in his apartment, Oliver felt perfectly content, like a perfectly round pebble in a quiet stream. Tonight, his playlist was a gentle mix of jazz, soft trumpet notes, and a slow piano easing their way into the peaceful quiet. He had a habit of putting on music that matched his mood, and tonight his mood was utterly calm. He thought about making a small dinner later, perhaps some pasta with fresh vegetables, but for now, the thought was just a distant hum in the back of his mind. His focus was on the stillness, the simple joy of having nowhere to be and nothing to do. It was a luxury, he often thought, this freedom to simply exist. He shifted slightly in the armchair, the worn fabric molding to his shape. His gaze drifted around the room, taking in the neat stacks of books on his shelf, the small green plant on the windowsill that he was surprisingly good at keeping alive, and the framed print of a misty forest that always made him feel a little bit more relaxed. Every item in his apartment had a story, a memory tied to it, making the space feel deeply personal and comforting. It was a reflection of him, quiet and thoughtful. The jazz music swelled slightly, a saxophone taking the lead with a mournful yet beautiful solo. Oliver closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. He imagined himself walking through that misty forest, the cool air on his face, the soft ground beneath his feet. It was a little escape, a moment of pure, unbothered peace. He smiled faintly. Yes, this was exactly how he liked his evenings. Peaceful, predictable, and entirely his own. Little did he know, the quiet calm was about to be stirred, gently at first, by a knock that would change the rhythm of his night entirely. The thought of any interruption was far from his mind. He was too lost in the comfort of his private world. The saxophone solo faded into the background, replaced by the gentle plinking of a piano. Oliver was still lost in the quiet comfort of his armchair, the misty forest still playing in his mind. He was just about to pick up his book again when a sound cut through the soft jazz. Rap, rap, rap. It was a knock. Oliver blinked, surprised. A knock, at this hour. He glanced at the old grandfather clock in the corner, its hands pointing past 9 o'clock. It wasn't terribly late, but it was later than anyone usually dropped by. He rarely had unexpected visitors, and certainly not after dinner. His friends usually called or texted first, and his family lived too far away for spontaneous visits. He frowned slightly, a tiny wrinkle appearing between his eyebrows. Who could it be? He thought about ignoring it, letting whoever it was assume he wasn't home, but a part of him, the part that was always a little curious, nudged him to get up. Maybe it was a package delivery, though that seemed unlikely at this time. Or perhaps one of the older residents in the building needed help with something. He was always happy to lend a hand. With a soft sigh, Oliver pushed himself out of the comfortable armchair, the cushions letting out a small puff of air as he moved. The sudden change from stillness to movement felt a little jarring, like stepping out of a warm bath into cool air. The jazz music continued its gentle rhythm, now seeming a little out of place with the unexpected interruption. He padded across the living room carpet, his steps quiet. As he got closer to the door, he paused for a moment, listening. There was no follow-up knock, just silence from the hallway. Had he imagined it? No, it had been distinct, firm. He reached the door, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He peered through the peephole, a tiny, distorted circle of the hallway. All he could see was a blurry patch of the wall opposite his door and a sliver of the old, floral wallpaper that lined the building's corridor. No one seemed to be directly in front of his door. He hesitated. Maybe they had already left. He was just about to turn away when he heard it again. Rap, rap, rap. This time it was softer, almost tentative, but definitely there, and it was followed by a faint shuffling sound, as if someone was waiting patiently. Oliver unlocked the door, the click of the latch sounding loud in the quiet apartment. He opened it just a crack, peering out cautiously. Standing there, leaning casually against the doorframe, was Matt, Oliver's neighbor from across the hall. A small wave of surprise washed over Oliver. Matt was a friendly face, always quick with a wave or a polite greeting in the hallway or the elevator. He was a little younger than Oliver, with an easy smile and kind eyes. But Matt had never knocked on his door before, not once in the 2 years they'd been neighbors. "Oh, hey," Oliver said, his voice a little softer than he intended, still surprised. He pushed the door open a little wider, his initial caution melting away, replaced by a mild curiosity. Matt looked perfectly normal, dressed in a soft t-shirt and jeans, a small, almost shy smile playing on his lips. He wasn't holding anything, just standing there, looking a little bit like he was caught in the act of something. "Hey, Oliver," Matt replied, his voice low and warm, a sound Oliver realized he hadn't heard much beyond quick hallway greetings. "Hope I'm not bothering you." Oliver shook his head, a small smile forming on his own lips. "No, not at all, just enjoying a quiet evening. What's up?" He wondered what Matt could possibly need. A shared tool. An opinion on a noisy neighbor. The possibilities were endless, yet none of them quite fit the slightly sheepish look on Matt's face. Oliver's question hung in the air, a soft invitation for Matt to explain his unexpected visit. Matt shifted slightly, his gaze darting from Oliver's face to somewhere over his shoulder, as if he were looking into the apartment. He had a small, shy smile that always made him seem even friendlier than he already was. "No, you're not bothering me at all," Oliver repeated, trying to put Matt at ease. "Come on in if you want, it's warmer in here than in the hallway." He gestured vaguely with his hand, a welcoming motion, though he kept the door from opening fully, still waiting for Matt's reason for being there. Matt's eyes, a warm shade of brown, met Oliver's again, and the shy smile broadened just a touch. He finally spoke, his voice still low, almost a murmur against the soft jazz playing inside. "Actually, I'm hoping you can help me out with something really basic." Oliver raised an eyebrow, a small laugh escaping his lips. "Basic? You've come to the right place then, I'm pretty basic myself." He chuckled, trying to lighten the mood, feeling a little awkward in the doorway. He usually wasn't this formal with Matt, but this situation felt new. Matt's smile stretched wider, a genuine, easy grin that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners just a little. "Well, I'm baking, or at least I'm trying to, and I just realized I'm completely out of sugar." He paused, a hint of playful embarrassment in his tone. "I know, rookie mistake, can't believe I didn't check." "A cup of sugar, that was it." Oliver felt a wave of mild amusement, mixed with a tiny pang of something else he couldn't quite name. It was such a common, neighborly request, yet it felt different coming from Matt at this hour, with that slightly nervous energy about him. It was a perfectly normal reason for a neighbor to knock, a reason that brought people together in quiet apartment buildings like this. "Sugar," Oliver repeated, a broad, warm smile now lighting up his own face. "Of course. I definitely have sugar, probably more than I know what to do with." He laughed again, genuinely amused. "What are you baking? Something good, I hope, if it's worth a late-night sugar emergency." Matt's eyes sparkled with that same playful embarrassment. "Chocolate chip cookies, my weakness, and I promised myself I'd make a fresh batch tonight." He shrugged, a slight lift of his shoulders. "So yeah, any chance you could spare a cup? Or half a cup, whatever you've got." "Consider it done," Oliver said, feeling a warmth spread through him. He liked helping out. And he particularly liked the idea of Matt baking cookies in his apartment across the hall. It painted a cozy picture. "Come on in, it'll just take me a second to grab it for you." He stepped back, opening the door wide, inviting Matt into his apartment properly. The soft jazz music seemed to welcome him too, its gentle notes filling the space with a calm, inviting atmosphere. Matt took a small step forward, his eyes still scanning the apartment, taking in the living room Oliver had just left. There was a faint scent of something sweet clinging to Matt, a hint of vanilla or chocolate, making Oliver's mouth water just a little. It was a comforting smell, one that spoke of home and warmth. Matt's smile was open and friendly. "Thanks, Oliver, you're a lifesaver. I was really craving these cookies." As he said this, he finally walked over the threshold, not just into the entryway, but directly into Oliver's home. Oliver had just finished saying, "Come on in. It'll just take me a second to grab it for you," stepping back to fully open the door. He expected Matt to take a small step forward, maybe just into the entryway, and wait politely as Oliver went to retrieve the sugar. That's what most people would do. That's what Oliver himself would do if he were in Matt's shoes. But Matt didn't stop at the entryway. Instead, Matt's foot crossed the threshold, and he moved past the immediate doorway, not just into the small space meant for coats and shoes, but directly into Oliver's living room. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask, didn't even slow his step. It was a fluid, almost natural movement, as if he'd been invited in countless times before. He walked past Oliver, his arm brushing Oliver's side as he went, a brief, warm contact that made a tiny spark jump in Oliver's skin. Oliver froze, his hand still on the doorknob, halfway between holding it open and letting it swing shut. His eyes followed Matt's easy progress. Matt's gaze swept over the living room, taking in the armchair, the bookshelf, the soft jazz still playing. He didn't look like a stranger in a new place. He looked like someone who had simply stepped into another room of his own home. A strange mix of feelings swirled through Oliver. Surprise, definitely. A little confusion, too. Was this normal? He knew Matt was friendly, open, and sometimes a bit informal, but this was a whole new level of familiar. It wasn't rude, exactly. It felt more like an assumption of comfort, a silent statement that he belonged here, even if just for a moment. It was an unspoken intimacy that Oliver hadn't anticipated. Matt turned, a small, genuine smile on his face, as if he hadn't noticed Oliver's momentary pause. "Nice place, Oliver," he said, his voice soft, almost admiring. "It always smells good out in the hallway when you're cooking. Thought I'd get a closer look." He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. Oliver managed a weak smile in return. "Thanks," he mumbled, closing the door softly behind him, the click of the latch sounding loud in the sudden quiet that had fallen between them. The jazz music, though still playing, felt less like background noise and more like a live performance happening just for them. He walked into his living room, a space that suddenly felt both familiar and brand new. Matt was standing near the edge of the rug, not quite in the center of the room, but definitely further than the entryway. He wasn't looking at anything specific, just taking in the general atmosphere. His hands were tucked into his pockets, giving him a relaxed, at-home kind of air. Oliver cleared his throat. "So, the sugar," he said, trying to regain a sense of normal. "It's in the kitchen, just through here." He gestured towards the archway leading to his small kitchen. Matt's eyes met his, and for a fleeting second, Oliver felt a current pass between them, something warm and unspoken. "Lead the way," Matt said, his voice a little deeper this time, a playful glint in his eyes. He didn't move immediately, though, waiting for Oliver to go first. It was a small gesture, but it acknowledged Oliver as the host, the owner of this suddenly very shared space. As Oliver walked towards the kitchen, he could feel Matt following close behind him. The air in the apartment, which had been so calm and predictable just moments ago, now felt charged, shimmering with an unspoken energy. Matt's presence wasn't just physical, it was an energy that filled the room, pushing back against the familiar quiet Oliver had cherished. And Oliver, to his own surprise, found he didn't mind it at all. In fact, a strange, excited flutter started in his chest. Oliver led the way into his small but tidy kitchen. The space was bright, with a window overlooking the quiet alley behind the building and a few small potted herbs sitting on the sill. He usually liked the calm, ordered feeling of his kitchen, but with Matt standing so close behind him, it suddenly felt much smaller and strangely much more alive. He turned to the pantry, reaching for the large bag of sugar he kept on the top shelf. "I think I have a measuring cup around here somewhere," he murmured, rummaging through a drawer for the right size. He could feel Matt's eyes on him, a warm, steady gaze that made the tiny hairs on his arms stand up. "Don't worry about it," Matt's voice said, surprisingly close to Oliver's ear. Oliver turned, a little startled, to find Matt standing right next to him, much closer than necessary. Matt held out a small, empty ceramic bowl, a cute, hand-painted one that Oliver recognized as his own. "I brought my own bowl for it, actually. Didn't want to make you find a cup too." Oliver looked at the bowl in Matt's hand, then back at Matt's face. He hadn't noticed Matt pick it up from the small side table in the living room, where Oliver often kept snacks or small trinkets. It was a bowl Oliver usually used for berries in the morning or a small handful of nuts. It was a very personal item, and Matt was holding it as if it were perfectly normal. "Oh," Oliver said, a little breathlessly. "Right, thanks." He took the bowl, his fingers brushing against Matt's as he did, and another small spark shot through him. He moved to the counter, setting the bowl down. "Okay, let's get you sugared up for those cookies." He tried to sound light-hearted, normal, but his voice felt a little tight. He reached for the sugar bag again, pulling it down. It was a large, heavy bag, and as he wrestled it onto the counter, he felt Matt's hand briefly touch his back, a supportive, steadying gesture. "Need a hand?" Matt asked, his voice a low rumble. "No, I've got it," Oliver replied, perhaps a little too quickly. He managed to open the bag, the white crystals gleaming under the kitchen light. He scooped out a generous amount into the ceramic bowl, filling it to the brim. "There you go. That should be plenty for your chocolate chip emergency." He turned, holding out the bowl of sugar to Matt. But Matt didn't reach for it right away. Instead, his eyes, which had been following Oliver's movements, now settled firmly on Oliver's face. There was a look in them Oliver couldn't quite place, something warm, something deep, something that made Oliver's heart beat a little faster. Then slowly, Matt took the bowl of sugar from Oliver's outstretched hand. But instead of holding on to it, or even turning to leave, Matt simply placed the bowl of sugar down on the kitchen counter, right between them. It was a deliberate, almost tender movement, as if the sugar itself was no longer the most important thing. The bowl sat there, a white mound in a small ceramic dish, a silent witness to the charged air in the kitchen. Matt's hands, now empty, didn't move away. They stayed close to Oliver, almost hovering, as his eyes never left Oliver's. The jazz music from the living room seemed to fade into a whisper, and the city hum outside was completely forgotten. All Oliver could hear was the frantic thumping of his own heart, and the quiet, steady breathing of Matt standing so close. The sugar was forgotten, a small, sweet offering now sidelined. The bowl of sugar sat innocently between them on the counter, a silent, sweet excuse for this unexpected closeness. But the sugar wasn't what held their attention. It was the way Matt's eyes, a deep, warm brown, were fixed on Oliver's, a look that spoke volumes without a single word. Oliver's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat in the sudden quiet of the kitchen. The jazz music from the living room was now a faint, almost imagined whisper, completely drowned out by the thumping in his ears. Matt's hands, which had been hovering near Oliver, now moved. Slowly, deliberately, they came up, not touching Oliver, but resting on the counter on either side of him. They were strong, capable hands, and their presence boxed Oliver in gently, subtly, against the cool surface of the counter. Oliver felt a jolt of electricity shoot through him, a thrilling current that made his breath catch in his throat. Then Matt took a small step forward, just one step, but it was enough. It closed the last remaining distance between them. Oliver felt the soft fabric of Matt's t-shirt brush against his own, the subtle warmth of Matt's body so close to his. He could smell the faint scent of baking, mingled now with something uniquely Matt, a clean, fresh scent like sunshine and subtle spice. Oliver's back met the kitchen counter with a soft thud. It wasn't a forceful push, not rough or sudden. It was gentle, almost tender, as if Matt were guiding him into place, a silent invitation to lean back and let himself be held. The cold surface of the counter against his back was a stark contrast to the sudden, burning heat that flared through him, an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the herbal tea he'd drunk earlier. Matt leaned in closer, his head tilting slightly. His eyes, still locked with Oliver, seemed to hold a question, a promise, a secret. The air in the kitchen, once filled with the mundane task of getting sugar, was now thick and heavy with unspoken feelings. Every breath Oliver took felt charged, every beat of his heart a loud declaration in the silence. He couldn't move, didn't want to move. He was pinned not by force but by an invisible, powerful pull. Oliver found himself looking at Matt's lips, the soft curve of them, the way they were just slightly parted. He wondered what it would feel like to touch them, to taste them. The thought, so sudden and vivid, sent another rush of heat through him. This wasn't just a neighborly visit anymore. This was something entirely different, something exciting and a little scary. Matt's gaze dropped from Oliver's eyes to his lips, lingering there for a long moment before rising back to meet Oliver's gaze. In that glance, Oliver saw everything he had dared not hope for, everything he hadn't even consciously realized he wanted. There was a desire there, raw and unmistakable, mirroring the sudden, intense longing that now bloomed fiercely within Oliver. His hands, which had been hanging loosely at his sides, now felt clumsy and unsure. He wanted to reach out to touch Matt, to confirm that this was real, that he wasn't imagining this electric tension. But he couldn't. He was held captive by Matt's eyes, by the close proximity, by the sheer unexpectedness of the moment. He felt a thrill, a wild, exhilarating rush that made him feel more alive than he had in a very long time. The sugar sat untouched, forgotten. The cookies were forgotten. All that mattered was Matt, so close, so real, pressing him gently against the counter, filling his quiet kitchen with a presence that was anything but quiet. Pinned gently against the counter, Oliver's mind, despite the roaring in his ears and the frantic beat of his heart, suddenly clicked into a new kind of awareness. It was as if a missing piece of a puzzle had just fallen into place, illuminating a picture he hadn't fully seen before. His gaze was still locked with Matt, but his thoughts began to race, tumbling backward through weeks, months, even years of small, seemingly insignificant moments. He remembered the first time he'd really noticed Matt. It was about a year ago in the laundry room downstairs. Oliver had been struggling with a particularly heavy basket of wet clothes, and Matt had appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, taking the basket from him with a casual, easy smile. "Here, let me get that for you," he'd said, his voice warm. Oliver had thanked him, a little flustered, and Matt had just winked, a quick, friendly gesture that had made Oliver's cheeks feel warm. He dismissed it then as simple neighborly kindness. Now he wondered. Then there were the hallway encounters, so many of them. The quick waves when they passed each other going to work, the shared smiles over a particularly noisy upstairs neighbor. Oliver had always thought of them as polite, friendly exchanges, the natural interactions of people living in close quarters. But now, in the charged silence of his kitchen, he saw them in a new light. He remembered the way Matt's eyes would linger on his for just a second longer than strictly necessary. A fleeting glance that Oliver had always attributed to Matt being a generally warm person. He recalled the way Matt's smile would broaden when he saw Oliver, a genuine, crinkling at the eyes kind of smile that always made Oliver feel a little brighter. There was the time Matt had complimented his new haircut, a simple, "looks good, Oliver," that had made Oliver feel oddly pleased all day. And the conversations, brief as they were. Having a good weekend, rough day at work, little questions that seemed to hold a deeper interest, a genuine concern that went beyond mere courtesy. Oliver had always considered himself a bit oblivious, not one to read too much into things. He preferred to take people at face value. But Matt's actions now, this undeniable closeness, this raw desire in his eyes, made Oliver reevaluate everything. Every single one of those seemingly innocent glances, every casual smile, every friendly wave now seemed infused with a new meaning. They weren't just politeness, they were tiny breadcrumbs, scattered hints that Matt had been leaving for him all along. And Oliver, in his comfortable, solitary world, had been too wrapped up in his own quiet routine to truly see them. A blush crept up Oliver's neck, a hot wave of embarrassment and exhilaration. How could he have been so blind? Had Matt been feeling this spark, this pull for all this time, the thought was both humbling and incredibly thrilling. It meant that this moment, this sudden, breathtaking intimacy, wasn't as sudden as it felt. It had been building slowly, steadily, beneath the surface of their neighborly politeness, like a quiet river carving a path through stone. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, yet it was a welcome one. It wasn't just him feeling this intense connection, Matt felt it too. It was in the way Matt's body was angled towards him, in the way his eyes never wavered, in the silent, powerful communication that passed between them. The familiarity of neighbors had suddenly blossomed into something far more profound, something that promised a thrilling, uncharted territory. And Oliver, to his utter surprise, felt ready to explore it. The revelation that those past moments meant more than simple politeness sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated thrill through Oliver. It wasn't just the surprise of the moment, the sudden closeness with Matt, but the exhilarating feeling of uncovering a hidden truth. It was like finding a secret message in plain sight, one that had been waiting for him to decipher all along. A wide, slow smile began to spread across Oliver's face, not one of amusement, but of profound, joyful discovery. His eyes, still locked with Matt's, softened with a mixture of wonder and a touch of mischief. All this time he'd been living next door to someone who saw him, truly saw him, in a way he hadn't even dared to imagine. It was a delicious, intoxicating thought. He felt a lightness in his chest, a bubble of pure happiness rising. It wasn't just a simple crush. It was the thrilling recognition of something deeper, something that had been quietly growing between them without his conscious knowledge. The idea that Matt had been sending him signals, however subtle, for so long, and that Oliver had finally caught on, made him feel both a little foolish and incredibly cherished. The thrill wasn't just about the possibility of what might happen next. It was about the validation, the sweet certainty that he wasn't alone in feeling this potent pull. It was the sudden, vibrant color that had been splashed across his previously muted understanding of their interactions. Every polite good morning, every shared laugh, every quick glance now felt like a secret handshake, a silent acknowledgement of a connection that ran deeper than apartment numbers and shared walls. Oliver felt a warmth bloom in his stomach, spreading through his limbs like a comforting fire. He'd always been a man who appreciated the quiet, the predictable, but this was an adventure, a delightful deviation from his usual path, and he found himself embracing it with an eagerness he hadn't known he possessed. The thrill of discovery was a powerful force, wiping away any lingering hesitation or confusion. He wanted to laugh, a loud, joyful sound, but he held it in, letting the emotion bubble silently within him. He wanted to reach out, to touch Matt's face, to trace the curve of his jaw, to confirm that this was real, that this wasn't a dream from his quiet, jazz-filled evening. The air between them hummed with an almost visible energy, a magnetic field pulling them closer. Matt's eyes, still holding his, seemed to reflect Oliver's own dawning realization, a mirroring of understanding and shared excitement. There was a flicker of relief in Matt's gaze, too, as if he had been waiting for Oliver to catch up, for this moment of mutual recognition. That flicker made Oliver's heart swell even more. It meant he hadn't misread Matt's current actions. It meant everything was real. The domestic space of his kitchen, which had always been a place for quiet meals and solitary tasks, now felt transformed. It was no longer just his kitchen. It was a stage for this thrilling, silent drama, a place where hidden feelings were finally coming to light. The counter against his back, once cold, now felt like a solid anchor, grounding him in this electrifying present. Oliver took a slow, deep breath, letting the scent of Matt, the faint sweetness of baking, and the sudden, heady scent of possibility fill his lungs. This was more than just a neighborly visit for sugar. This was the opening of a new chapter, a thrilling, unexpected turn in the quiet story of his life, and he was ready to turn the page. The thrill of discovery was a powerful current, but beneath it, another feeling began to deepen and solidify. The profound intimacy of this moment, amplified by the very space they occupied. Oliver's apartment, his sanctuary, his quiet retreat, was no longer just his. With Matt standing so close, his hands bracketing Oliver on the counter, his eyes speaking volumes, the space itself felt different. It was imbued with a new kind of magic, a silent witness to a blossoming connection. Every object in the kitchen, usually so familiar and mundane, now seemed to hold a special glow. The worn wooden cutting board, the chipped ceramic mug hanging from a hook, even the little potted herbs on the windowsill, they were no longer just items. They were silent observers, part of this intensely personal scene unfolding between him and Matt. This wasn't a meeting in the neutral territory of the hallway or a chance encounter at the corner store. This was happening here in Oliver's private world, the place where he let his guard down, where he was truly himself. And Matt was here. Not just at the door, but deep inside, past the polite barriers, past the unspoken rules of neighborly distance. He was in Oliver's kitchen, the heart of his home, pressing him gently against the counter, his presence filling every corner of the small room. It made everything feel incredibly personal, intensely special. It was as if Matt wasn't just stepping into his apartment, but into the quiet, guarded corners of Oliver's very soul. Oliver felt a warmth spread through him, not just from the unexpected desire, but from a deep sense of comfort. Matt's presence here, in this most domestic of spaces, felt strangely right. It was an intimacy that bypassed words, a silent understanding that resonated with every fiber of Oliver's being. His home, which he had always cherished for its solitude, now felt richer, more vibrant, simply because Matt was in it. He thought of the jazz music, still playing softly in the living room. It was his music, his chosen soundtrack for quiet evenings. But now it was Matt's music too for this moment. The faint scent of Oliver's herbal tea, still lingering in the air, mingled with the subtle, sweet scent of Matt, creating a new aroma that Oliver suddenly wanted to bottle and keep forever. The familiarity of his surroundings, usually a source of calm, now served to deepen the emotional intensity. There was no escaping the moment, no place to hide. This was his kitchen, his life, and Matt was undeniably, thrillingly, a part of it now. The fact that Matt had walked in so casually, had set the sugar aside so carelessly, spoke volumes. It wasn't about the sugar or the cookies. It was about Asterisk being here, with Oliver in his space, making it their space, even if just for these fleeting, electric moments. A soft sigh escaped Oliver's lips, a sound he hadn't even realized he was holding in. It was a sigh of acceptance, of surrender, of pure, unadulterated joy. He looked into Matt's eyes, and in their depths he saw not just desire but a profound respect, a gentle acknowledgement of the personal space they were now sharing. This was more than just a physical closeness. It was an emotional one, nurtured by the very walls that surrounded them. And Oliver, for the first time in a long time, felt truly, deeply seen within the comfort of his own home. Oliver's sigh, soft and accepting, seemed to be the only sound in the universe for a long moment. Then, Matt's eyes, which had been holding Oliver captive, finally softened, and a slow, tender smile bloomed on his face. It was a smile of pure warmth, a silent promise. He moved one hand from the counter slowly, carefully, and lifted it to Oliver's cheek. His thumb brushed gently over Oliver's skin, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down Oliver's spine. "Hey, Oliver," Matt whispered, his voice a low, husky sound that vibrated through Oliver. It was the first word either of them had spoken in what felt like an eternity, and it was perfect. It wasn't a question or a request, just a soft acknowledgement of Oliver, of Asterisk them. Oliver leaned into the touch, his eyes fluttering closed for a brief second, savoring the feeling. The world outside his kitchen, the city hum, the gentle jazz, all faded into insignificance. All that existed was the warmth of Matt's hand on his cheek, the closeness of their bodies, and the unspoken understanding that hummed between them. When Oliver opened his eyes again, Matt was even closer, his gaze full of a tender intensity that made Oliver's breath catch once more. Matt's head tilted, and Oliver knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, what was about to happen. This wasn't just a neighborly visit anymore. It was the start of something truly wonderful, a sweet surprise he hadn't known he was craving. Slowly, Matt leaned in, his eyes still on Oliver's, asking for permission without a single word. Oliver didn't need to speak. His eager lean, the slight tilt of his head, was all the answer Matt needed. Their lips met, soft and hesitant at first, a gentle exploration. It was a kiss that tasted of lingering sweetness from the forgotten sugar, of the fresh scent of Matt, and of the heady promise of a new beginning. It wasn't a sudden, fiery kiss, but a slow, tender deepening, a quiet confirmation of all the glances, all the smiles, all the unspoken feelings that had been building between them for so long. Oliver felt a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness wash over him, a feeling so profound it made his eyes prickle with joyful tears. This was more than just a kiss. It was a conversation, a declaration, a silent agreement that their lives, once separate, were now intertwined. Matt's hand moved from Oliver's cheek to cup the back of his neck, pulling him in just a fraction closer, deepening the kiss. Oliver's hands, which had been stiff at his sides, finally found their way to Matt's waist, holding on, grounding himself in this incredible moment. He felt a sense of belonging, of coming home, that he hadn't realized he was missing. The city apartment, once a quiet refuge for one, now felt like a vibrant space for two. The jazz music, still playing softly in the living room, seemed to swell, its notes becoming a celebratory anthem for this unexpected, beautiful turning point. The sugar, still sitting innocently in its bowl on the counter, was a symbol of the sweet, simple request that had led to something so much more profound. This wasn't just the end of a quiet evening, it was the thrilling beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with the promise of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and many more moments of unexpected intimacy. Oliver knew, with a certainty that warmed him from the inside out, that his life had just gotten a whole lot sweeter, thanks to a simple cup of sugar and a neighbor who dared to walk right in. The quiet story of Oliver was now a duet, and he couldn't wait to hear the music they would make together.